Have you ever encountered a hurdle with launching or growing your business? Listen, there are two things that run a business, the back end and your soft skills.
Telling you right now, if these aren't in place, you'll lose clients and you'll lose money. You don't want that? Well, you're in the right place.
Hey, I'm Dana.
Hey, I'm Sarah.
We're your hosts of the Entrepreneur Encounter, and we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes glance into our businesses, give you genuine feedback, tips and tricks, plus occasionally bring on guests that care about supporting you to grow your business organically and nurturing authentic relationships. Are you ready? Attention service-based entrepreneurs, unleash the power of Pinterest with a professionally optimized business account. In case you're new here, my name is Dana, co-host of Entrepreneur Encounter, and I want to be your Pinterest setup specialist. Together, we will tailor your Pinterest presence to your brand and audience, optimize your profile with captivating visuals and descriptions, develop a strategic pinning plan to reach your target audience, and then integrate Pinterest with your other marketing channels so you can repurpose instead of working harder. Then, if you love your Pinterest account setup, I do have ongoing support packages for continued success. So if you've been wanting to unlock Pinterest potential for your wedding planning business, contact me at my website, ddvirtualmanagement.com, and we can get started. Welcome back, listeners, to another amazing episode. I'm your host, Dana.
And Sarah.
And we are the duo behind the Entrepreneur Encounter podcast. And today we are going to be talking about a few amazing things, creating your own measure of success, and a few other topics that are really near and dear to Sarah and I. But to do that, we have a guest, Adriana Baer. She's a public speaking coach whose mission is to help clients claim their stage, radiate confidence and charisma, propel their career, and increase their impact. And I know when I spoke with her probably a month ago at this point, I just could have talked forever. So I'm super excited to have her on. And Adriana, I'm going to let you kind of dive deeper into who you are and who you serve and how you got to this space.
Well, I'm so happy to be with both of you today. I love talking to duos of hosts. I think it's really fun. So I'm Adriana Baer. I'm a public speaking coach, and I come to this work by way of over 20 years as a professional theater director. So where I differ a little bit from some of the sort of typical public speaking coaches that you might think of when you're thinking of Toastmasters or big stages or whatever that is. I come from the background of a creative artist and leader and director. So the work that I do is one-on-one coaching to help people speak in whatever environment they need to speak in, whether that's one-on-one when they're building their business or pitching to a room full of investors or representing their company out in the world. What I do is I help them kind of connect with their audience and figure out what's blocking them from speaking, maybe where those nerves are, and help with tools for that. So that's a little bit about me.
I love that your background is in theater because you're on stage. How cool is that? I'm a big movie buff, so anything that has like the arts and whatnot, it's pretty cool to have people that are in that same area that have that same interest.
Yeah.
Do you feel as that having that background has helped you become a better public speaker and a coach?
Oh, absolutely. I stopped being on stage right around the end of college. Like I trained as an actor, but then I really focused on directing. And so my relationship with the work really changed from being the person on stage to being the audience and being the sort of witness of the work and the coach of the performers. And I think that because of that, I have this background of how do you actually do the talking and all the skills around like warming up your body and warming up your voice and warming up your breath and all that stuff. But then I also really understand how important it is to be able to do the storytelling so that the audience can understand you. And I don't necessarily mean once upon a time story, right? I mean like the story of your business or the story of your passion project or your mission or your vision. So I help people kind of on 3 levels, both the technical piece, like how do I stand up and do the thing? And then also on the content piece, what am I saying? What is my script? What are my bullet points and outlines? And then finally that audience piece. So what do I want the audience to do or think or feel or experience? And how do I relate to them? And then sometimes, of course, that audience piece is like, oh my God, they're looking at me and judging me. So we do a lot of mindset work and that kind of thing as well.
That's awesome. It's funny that you talk about getting in front of the stage, even on a podcast, because technically you're on a stage of some sort. I remember when we started this podcast, I was so afraid because I used to teach workshops in front of groups of people. And then I stopped doing that. So I was out of practice of like public speaking. And then when we started the podcast, I had stage fright a lot. And then as the time goes on, the mindset and the practice helped a lot. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's a key thing. Just rehearsal and repetition is so important for getting better at anything we know.
Oh yeah.
But especially something that makes you nervous. The more you do it, the more you get skills and the more you sort of experience those moments where everything goes wrong and you realize, hey, I can recover from that and everything's okay, you know?
Yeah, because you're not getting like physically hurt. You're not going to die from like, not necessarily failing, but like, you know, you feel the fear of failing because you messed up, but it takes a lot of time, especially if you're new to it as well.
How did that fear manifest for you, Sarah, when you first started?
Okay. I tend to talk a lot. I don't know if you would call that like extroverted. I don't know. But I fear as I can't get my point across sometimes. So when I'm trying to have a conversation, I feel like I'm going in circles. So that's where the fear stems from. But I've said, whatever, like it is what it is. That's who I am. That's me as a person. And nobody can take that away from me. So I'm just going to do what I've been doing and just go with it. Just go with the flow.
Yeah. So that sounds like your kind of biggest thing that you stumble with is that second piece, that kind of content, which is like, how do I get my message across? Am I making sense? Am I being too long-winded?
Yeah.
Am I rambling? Am I repeating myself? So yeah, so there's definitely skills that I coach on about how to kind of map out what you're saying so that it's not a speech or a script that you're memorizing, but it's, I know my key points are ABC, and how do I drive towards the next point so that I feel confident? Because the other thing is, you know, and this can happen on podcasts just as much as it can happen in real life, is like somebody gets some weird microphone feedback or somebody drops a tray of coffee cups in the other room. And if we're either not focused enough on what we're saying or we're too like, I've got to say this speech exactly as I wrote it and memorized it, then we don't have any ability to handle those moments where something goes sideways. And the best thing to do when that happens is just to acknowledge it, because we're all humans humaning together, right?
Right.
Humans humaning.
And then get back on track, right? But if you don't know where you are, or you're like, oh God, you're not alone in that for sure.
And then maybe sometimes I don't know when to stop talking. No, I'm just kidding. No, I know when to stop talking, but.
Well, that's true too. That happens a lot. And I always say within structure, there is freedom. So if you know what your points are, what sort of the scaffolding or structure in your speech is, then you can have a lot of freedom inside of that to kind of wander, to tell a story that just came to you or whatever that is. But you know where you're headed, you know where your end point is.
Right.
Then you have that to lean into.
It takes time, takes practice, you know, one step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I read a blog post on your website. Introverts have public speaking superpowers.
Yeah.
That was interesting because even though I say, yes, I talk a lot, I feel that I can be both sided, like introverted and extroverted. Because what I read in the article, it said, you know, introverts have a bullshit meter.
Yeah.
We're self-aware, like we know. But I thought that was pretty interesting because I think Dana is, and I think a lot of our guests and our listeners have self-aware. But how do we have those superpowers? Like, how do you think that introverts have the speaking superpowers?
Well, so my feeling is this. So I've coached a lot of introverts. I'm also married to an introvert and the parent of an introvert. And so what I have observed over the years is that one of the things that audiences don't like is fake anything. They just don't buy it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so they may not know what's not feeling right, what's feeling off, what's feeling distracting, what's feeling confusing to them, but they won't be able to lean in. And one of the things that causes that the most is people kind of posturing or pretending to be somebody that they're not, or like trying to kind of, I don't know, make this appear to be like they're playing the role of a public speaker on TV instead of really being one. And one of the things that I notice with introverts is that they generally actually have a much harder time doing the fake it till you make it thing. So the whole idea that they could just like pretend to be Tony Robbins or like pretend to be, I don't know, Meryl Streep or something and speak, they're like, I can't really do that. Like authentically, I don't have those skills. I don't have that desire. I don't know. Like that doesn't fit the costume. And so they don't do that, which means that what happens on stage is that they then become authentic, more grounded. They might be shy. They might be quiet. They might be reserved. We can work on those things skills wise, toolbox wise.
Mm-hmm.
But they tend to be more authentic, more truthful on stage, which means that then the audience believes them. They buy into what they're saying. So that's this like kind of subtle superpower, I call it. And the superpower is you can see the bullshit and you also don't do the bullshit.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, but that makes me boring. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, so let's work on like, what does boring mean? Okay, do you need more vocal inflection? Great, let's pop that up. Do you need to hold yourself differently on stage? We can work on those external things, but the hardest thing is the internal work. And I noticed that a lot of introverts tend to be pretty self-reflective and they tend to know themselves pretty well, like what works, what doesn't, at least once they're grown-ups, you know?
Right.
And so that just makes them a little bit more truthful on stage.
I love that.
That last part, the self-reflection and that being kind of the harder part, that kind of hit closer to me. Because like when we first started the podcast, because I felt like my face wasn't being seen, it didn't feel like a stage. So I was talking left and right. I didn't care what we said. I was like leaving jokes for our podcast editor to like have to cut out just because I thought it was funny. But that would not manifest with the mindset of I'm standing on a stage and having to do that where people are actually going to see me. I very much thrive behind the scenes and I like to be behind the scenes. So what type of self-reflection work or strategies do you recommend someone that maybe falls in line with that to see their strengths and weaknesses so that they can improve on their public speaking, whether they're on a big stage or a small stage? Or in my case, a hidden stage, and like transfer that confidence somewhere else.
So Dana, I will answer your question, but I am curious for you, what happens in your body, your breath, your brain when you do think about standing up in front of a bunch of people or on a stage?
I feel like my breath gets quick, but mainly my chest gets tight and everything starts going cold. I talk with my hands a lot and I don't like looking silly. Honestly, when we first even just hypothetically talking about launching the podcast, my whole pitch for myself was, well, as long as I don't show my face, I can talk all day long. And Sarah's quickly learned that that is in fact the case, which is why we go back and forth of doing this as a video podcast. And I'm like, now people will see me, so I may not be as confident on the episodes. So when we first launched, Sarah was very nervous in the beginning. So like I was making her laugh and trying to leave jokes with our editor to like intentionally, he would have to cut that out type thing. And it was really funny. And so then we had bloopers. And once it was already done, I was fine. But shifting it to like, this being on video, or I'm now attending in-person networking events where I have decided to have more speaking opportunities in person. This type of stage where I'm invisible, basically, mentally, I can talk and I'm confident and I almost don't really care what I say. I share my 2 cents, I move on. But how can someone like myself with that like self-reflection, internal work, transfer that confidence into a stage that is much more visible?
Mm-hmm. That's such an important question. I'm really glad you brought that up. So a couple things I heard you say was people will see me. So I'm curious about that a little bit because I can see you right now. So I technically, Sarah and I are like a little tiny mini audience for you right here. But it sounds like in your mind, the mindset piece or the engaging with that third level, that audience level is really the block for you. So it's like, they're going to see me. They're going to judge me. What else comes up for you when you imagine or you are going to these networking events? What's happening kind of for you, either in your physical body or in your sort of mindset? What is actually going on? Can you describe the feelings or the thoughts?
I mainly don't want to look or sound dumb, more or less.
Okay.
Like what I say may be misunderstood or said in a way where I look like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Even though when it comes to organization and customer service and things like that, like I genuinely do because I eat, sleep, and breathe making customers happy.
Yeah. Sounds like there's maybe a little bit of what some people might use the phrase imposter syndrome, like, do I really know my stuff? If they're going to hear me say something that makes me sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I do know what I'm talking about. So when you're going into these networking events, do you have an elevator pitch crafted? Like, is that a thing that you've worked on?
Oh, 100%. And I read from it every time.
You read from it?
I do read from it.
What about if you like meet someone in the line at the bathroom and I'm like, hey, I'm Adriana. What do you do?
Oh.
Are you able to answer that question?
Yes.
So it sounds like it's more the public facing thing that's the problem. It's not the one-on-one. It's not the like small, intimate, like hanging out, chatting at the coffee cart. It's the I have to present in front of a room full of people piece.
Yes. So something I distinctly remember because I was coerced to get my college degree, take a public speaking class. It was not my best class, but I noticed if the classroom was in like a rounded seating style, I mean, I was nervous regardless, but I was significantly less nervous than when they were the same people were in a auditorium, like lined style.
Ooh, this is so good. The fact that you recognize that is so key. So what I'm doing right now, I'm like not officially answering your question because I'm like interested in kind of coaching you. I'm like delving into this stuff because honestly, this is part of the process. It's like figuring out what is it for me as the speaker? What is my specific block? So you have to ask yourself a lot of these questions, like, what is it really? Because a lot of people casually say like, I'm afraid of public speaking. I hate public speaking. And I think there's this idea that everybody experiences that the same way, or that means the same thing for everybody, but it really doesn't. Like we've already identified that for Sarah, it's a content thing. Am I getting my point across in a way that makes sense? For you, Dana, it's like you also are wondering about that. But for you, you're talking so much more about the other people. Like, what is the audience like? What are they thinking, saying, doing? Literally, how are they sitting makes a difference for you. So that awareness is so important. So what I'm hearing when you say that is that when you're in a room full of peers, right? So that's that equal democratic layout. And as a theater director, we think about this stuff all the time. Space, the setup of the audience and its relationship to the speaker, like that's a huge piece of the puzzle. But for you, if you're in that democratic, like everybody sitting in a circle, that feels very different than like there's a sea of audience and I'm alone, right? I'm not a peer in this room. There's an othering. So the audience or the people are this idea and I am this other thing that's different from them now because I'm standing up or I'm saying the words, right? Does that feel accurate?
Yeah, I didn't think about it in that mindset of I'm the other thing, but yes.
Yeah, you said some things about like, they're going to think I'm dumb or like, am I making silly moves with my hands? Or there's a lot of this, I'm a thing and they're this other thing. So what for you, the work I would do with you is really getting clearer on who the audience is actually. Like literally, if you know them, but also if you don't know them. So you can do some work around creating your kind of ideal audience character in a way and say like, who is this message for? And if you know somebody in the room, like say Sarah's at a networking event with you and she's standing in the back of the room, you can actually give your talk to her. And you're like, hey, she's a friendly person that I know is not going to judge me for making funny faces, right? Like, I can imagine that the way that you might give that talk or the way you might present when you're thinking about talking to a friend is very different from the way you might then feel presenting in front of a room full of strangers that might be judging you. So for you, I think the work is like, who am I talking to? What do I want them to do with this information? And then we kind of backtrack from there. So if you're like, I want to educate, I want to inspire, I want to motivate, I want to create, I want them to be my customers. Like you've got to really figure out what's your goal of speaking. Why are you actually speaking in this moment, right? Not big picture, but like right now, right here with these people. And who are they? And you can do this work whether you know somebody in the room or not. You just make them up. You literally make up a character. When we do that work, what we find is that when we know who we're talking to and we can kind of identify, this is this character that I've created. It's like a woman in her 40s who like had Cheerios for breakfast with her kids and then like drove here and is really tired, but is excited to be here. And she's drinking coffee. And like, when you get that specific with this person, then what you realize is like, you really are talking to a peer or a like colleague or a person who feels good to you, as opposed to, again, that othering, right? So maybe it sounds simpler than it really is, but I think a lot of times what we've got to drill down and figure out what is our specific issue. And then how do I tackle that thing? Because you could be like, I'm afraid of public speaking. And I could sit over here and give you a bunch of physical warm-up techniques and tell you how to hold a microphone, but that doesn't sound like your problem.
Yeah. I don't need a microphone.
Me either. So does that kind of make sense in terms of digging in and figuring out what the real issue is?
Yes. I like the character building idea. I think you said you've listened to previous episodes and whatnot, but I am a nerd and I love tabletop RPG games, and all of that includes character building.
Oh, yeah.
And me and my son do this in our free time all the time.
Yes.
To make characters that we never even play. Can just implement that in this part of the process.
No, actually, that's such a great idea for you. And really just to be thinking about like, who do I want to receive this message? And make it specific. It's not a wall of anonymous judges. It's like this person here and now. And then the other thing, and you and I talked about this a little bit, Dana, when we chatted a couple weeks ago, but one of the things that I think is super important, and we often forget to do this, is to create our own measure of success. So in the world that we're currently in, where we put so much content out into the sphere and like rarely get feedback, whether that's a podcast and then maybe a couple people tell us they listened, or it's LinkedIn posts, Instagram posts, Facebook, we're just putting content out all the time, right? Same thing with speaking. You can put out a speech, you can go to an event, and if you're not clear on what your goals are, so we're back to that, what's your goal for this thing? Then you could leave that stage or leave that experience and have no idea how well it went. And if you're a person who is nervous about such things, or you're the kind of person who runs back through things in your head all the time to see if you said anything dumb, then like you run the risk of thinking that it went really badly with absolutely no data whatsoever. You're just going to be like, I think it was bad. And if it's a speech or a presentation, you might just like throw the whole thing out because you thought it didn't work. So you've got to get really clear on how you're going to measure that. For example, if you say, my goal is to educate my audience, right? I want to teach them something. Then how do you measure whether or not they received that information? That's a really different goal than I want 5 people to come up to me after this and ask for a discovery call. It's also a really different goal from I want to make people laugh, and at the end, I want them to give me a standing ovation, right?
I would not know what to do with something like that. That would not be my goal.
Right. I mean, I don't think it actually should be anyone's goal because that is, again, reliant on the actions of others to determine whether or not you were successful. I've directed lots of plays, had thousands of performances of my work, and I cannot control whether or not somebody stands up at the end of that play or not. So I can only control what I can control. But for you, for all of us, I think it's really important to decide in advance what your measure of success is. I'll give a super easy example that everybody can relate to. We make a post on Instagram. You got to decide what the goal of that post is before you post it. Because if you post it and you don't decide and 0 people like it or comment on it, you might subconsciously or consciously think that was a bad post. That post failed. Nobody likes my content, right?
Yeah.
Now, if your goal was to have 25 likes and comments on that post and you got 0, guess what? You're right. It did not work. Your goal was not met. You did not achieve your goal. But if your goal was, I want to practice putting my face on the internet, and you put your face on the internet, then A+ for you, then that was success. So we've got to decide in advance how we're going to measure that success so that we can then be critical thinkers about what's working and what's not. So I want to leave knowing that my audience really understood my content. Okay, then how are we going to measure that? I want to leave feeling like I got all the words out in the right order.
Mm-hmm.
Right? For you, Sarah. I had 4 minutes and I spoke for 4 minutes. I didn't speak for 8. And I spoke for 4 and I got all my points through. So these are the ways that you're going to figure out then, okay, then what do I do differently next time? What do I keep? What do I throw away? What do I need to work on? So you're actually working on the right stuff. And that then helps with the repetition and the burnout, which is the other thing I wanted to mention. I think creating your own measure of success can really help with that feeling of overwhelm and burnout. Because again, I think this is true for everybody, but introverts especially. There is an energetic toll on putting ourselves out there.
Oh, yeah.
And similar to you, Sarah, I guess we call me an ambivert now, where I'm like 50% of me needs time by myself and 50% of me needs time in the world. So even for me, I notice what happens to my body or my energy immediately after a speaking event. If you're my daughter, you crash hard instantly. It's like she has a piano recital and then she is down for the count instantly. For me, I do some kind of event, even like a podcast episode, like my adrenaline will be up for a couple of hours afterward, and then I might crash.
That's interesting.
So you got to figure out for yourself too, like pay attention to your own energy and then build in those buffers. So if you're going to crash after you do a public speaking event, then by all means, give yourself that grace. Don't schedule anything for the rest of the day. Don't think that like you're the kind of person who can go out with everybody who is there and like do more. You might not be. And it may not allow you then to be more thoughtful about how you are in the world and what you really need in order to be successful at this thing. So really paying attention to our energy is an important part of public speaking. It really is.
I love this because a couple of weeks ago, I had meetings literally all day, one day. And by the time I picked up my kids and got home, I was done.
Yeah.
I was checked out. I peopled too much.
Yes.
I was talking too much. I was just like, I was done. And like, you know, when you pick up the kids from school, they still have all this energy and they're like, let's do this. I'm like, I just want to go to bed.
Yeah.
And it's not even 3:00 yet, you know?
Yeah. And I think that can really, in this world in which we context switch so often, which is, we know, incredibly bad for our productivity, our mental health, our burnout, we context switch constantly. We think that we can go from a meeting to a phone call to a coffee shop to a presentation to a meeting, and even worse if it's back-to-back online, right?
Right.
Well, when you're in the theater and you're going to go perform, there's something called the half hour, where you have to be in the theater no later than 30 minutes prior to the performance. You have to be checked in and in your dressing room. And most people are there much more than 30 minutes. Usually it's an hour or so, but union rules say no later than 30 minutes. That's your prep time. That's your getting your clothes on, your makeup done. That's warming up. That's getting grounded. That's connecting in with the people around you. That has been going on for millennia. That's how people prepare to speak in front of other people. Why we think now that we should just be able to like walk at the door and be ready, it doesn't work. It's not fair. It's unreasonable and it makes us not good at this. Instead, go to the space. And this might be a thing for you, Dana. What I like to do is I like to go to a space early and like hang out in the room. It's kind of cheesy, but it's like you say hello to the room and you like, I know I can send it to you. I have a little tutorial video. It's very short. It's called How to Say Hello to the Room. And you just sit there and you're like, hi, room. Hey, room. We're going to be working together today. Like, just feel the energy of the space. It also gives you a chance to stand where you're going to be presenting from and to kind of check out the space. Like, how far away is the farthest person going to be? Do I need to be loud or can I be intimate? Or do I need to turn my body to look very far left or very far right? Are they at tables? Or are they in a row? Like, what's the vibe going to be? You know, and hopefully you have time to do this and you can get in the venue or whatever it is. If you can't, then you still need to take a moment before you go up there to just kind of open your eyes, open your peripheral vision and check out, like, what is this space that me in 3 dimensions is physically in right now? And get yourself grounded, get your feet under you, take a couple of deep breaths and really be present, show up. Mm-hmm. Instead of going from like, I'm going to look at my phone or blah, 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 or like I'm chatting with somebody and now I have to talk. It's like, our brains, we can't do that. We need a beat. So for each person, again, your own unique kind of warm up, physical, vocal, whatever that is, you got to figure it out for yourself. But it's important to take that time.
So one thing, I don't say hi to the room. I haven't. I probably will.
Try it and then message me and tell me what you thought.
But the ladies in this networking group, they do laugh at me because I call ahead and order my food because I don't want to be eating and talking at the same time.
I love it. That's so smart.
Because when this group of ladies first started, I was talking at a surprisingly amount for someone who was like, I don't even want to start this group in the first place. Like, full transparency. I was like, I'm busy and I don't have time to like build a group from the ground up. Mm-hmm. But I continued to be approached by it. So I was like, okay, fine. But like, it's going to have to be a team effort. I don't want to do it all by myself. But no one else liked public speaking either. And I just did it anyway. And I was like, well, whatever. And I kind of made a joke about it. Like, y'all just bear with me. We're going to make it through.
Yes.
But I started ordering my food ahead so that I could eat while someone else welcomed. And then I was done by the time I needed to like, hey, let's get this thing actually moving now type thing. But maybe if I said hey to the room, it'd be better.
Yes, it's just a tool. Saying hello to the room is a tool. Ordering your food in advance is a tool. I know this is not what you're talking about, but we have to nourish our bodies. For most of us, it's probably not a great idea to drink like 8 cups of coffee and forget to eat and not drink any water and then walk up and start talking, right? But we do. We do.
Oh, yeah.
We're busy humans, moms, and like whatever. Here we are. So those things, whether it's just like eating so you can be done with that. There's all these different kind of tools. But the thing that shows me, Dana, is it's just self-awareness. And that's ultimately like, we've got to dig deep into our own stuff and figure out what we need and what's blocking us and then get the right tools for the right problem. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the other thing that you said that I think is a really great tool is to acknowledge the thing. Acknowledge it. Like, hey, this makes me wildly uncomfortable. But that's what it's talking about with the, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, yeah, okay, me too. Like I said before, we're humans humaning. And Sarah already asked this about the introvert thing. But like, if you get up and you're like, hey, this is uncomfortable for me. I don't love this, but we're going to get through it together. That makes people on your team.
Yeah.
They're rooting for you. And then they feel seen because they're like, oh, me too. Or not, right? Now, I will coach you until the cows come home to not undermine yourself before you speak. So I don't recommend that as like a constant tactic, because I think if it's not really truthful in that moment, it can take away from your power and from your presentation to point out problems or weaknesses in advance. Women do this so much more than men. And how many speeches I've seen by dudes who are terrible at it. And like, they don't get up and apologize for themselves before they talk, right? They just talk and we listen, right? And I think a lot of women will be like, oh gosh, I'm so nervous. Okay, haha. Da, 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 da. For 35 seconds of like, please don't look at me. Don't pay attention to me. Blah, 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 blah. And then they start talking and then we're like, where are we? What's our relationship? But again, the way that you said that, Dana, that was a room of colleagues, of peers, of friends. And what you said is, we're going to get through this together.
Mm-hmm.
I love that language, because that then puts everybody on the same team and on the same page. And it's a colleague, it's a community thing.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to I'm up in front of a room full of 300 people and I'm like, no, I'm terrible. Which might be how you're feeling. But again, we got to really suit the situation to the room that you're in. Like, let's make sure that you're not losing your power, but rather like giving yourself tools.
Gotcha.
We have superpowers. Everybody, we have superpowers.
Yes.
I love it.
It's going to be my new sticky note on my desk. You have superpowers.
That's right.
I feel like this is the second or third episode where it's come up about women entrepreneurs in general that do have superpowers, whether they're introverts, they have ADHD, they don't like a big stage, whatever the case may be. Like, the fact that you're taking the leap to even try entrepreneurship is a superpower.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I love it. So while we're rolling ahead, for everyone in our audience that enjoyed this eclectic episode, for anyone that would like to touch base with you outside of here, they loved what they heard, they want to work with you, they want to get on center stage, like, how can they find you? How can they contact you? All the things.
Yes. So I'm on all the social platforms. Well, not all of them, but I'm on Instagram and I'm on the LinkedIn. But the real way that you can get in touch with me is my website, which is claimcenterstage.com. Claimcenterstage.com is where I have a bunch of free tools, online courses, info about my one-on-one coaching, and then a way to get in touch with me and book a free call to kind of figure out what some of the tools are that you might need.
I love it. I'm looking at your tools right now.
Also,
awesome. More coming.
Her website's pretty cool. I like her website.
God, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, all of the information is going to be in the show notes, the website, all the things. And until next time,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Remember, soft skills aren't just some fluffy buzzwords that get thrown around in the corporate world. They're the key to unlocking your full potential as a professional and a human being. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself and seek out opportunities to improve your soft skills. Sarah and I have a variety of workshops, online courses, and complimentary clarity calls for you to practice in real time with us. Links are always in the show notes. And be sure to join us next time for more insights, tips, and tricks to help you succeed in your entrepreneur encounter.